Hey folks, you know that now is about the time that we have a guest on the show talking about something that we're all interested in. Well, today we're going to talk about America. We're interested, guns and freedom. So it's a book by Dr. Miguel Faria, and it's titled America, Guns and Freedom, A Journey into Politics and the Public Health and Gun Control Movements. You've heard segments, you've heard pieces of this, you've heard us say that we have a belief in this. He's here to tell us that he has facts and he has knowledge and he has data. He started out as he was the editor of the Journal of the Medical Association of Georgia, and he studied the problem of gun violence and discovered, imagine this, he discovered that gun research was conducted by the medical establishment, and it was not scientific, but instead politicized. Imagine. It was politicized and not fact-based. So Dr. Faria, thank you very much for joining Rob and I on the Target Radio.
I am very happy to be here, Amanda.
Well,
and by the
thanks.
way, I do want to congratulate you because you have just been awarded a Defender of Liberty Award by the Second Amendment Foundation, and I'm very proud of you.
Well, thank you. I'll tell you, they could have knocked me over with a feather when they handed that to me. It was it's a pretty amazing honor because the folks from the Second Amendment Foundation are absolute Second Amendment rock stars. And so how in the world did you decide that as a doctor you were going to start to look into this, and then the more you looked, the more it didn't make sense?
Well, very interesting. I write a lot, and I was appointed editor of the Medical Association of Georgia, and the AMA, which is kind of like the umbrella organization, had decided that they will have a domestic violence campaign. In other words, we, the doctors, are going to fight domestic violence. And instead of really dealing with that issue, we found a lot of gun control papers, and they were being disseminated through the medical journals at the state medical journal level. Mm-hmm. And we were supposed to publish this information, and when I started reviewing those articles, I found that they were based on junk science. They have preordained conclusions. They all ended with the conclusion that guns were bad, that easy availability, in quotes, promotes crime. And I was astounded because here I am, I was a neurosurgeon, and I'd done a lot of research, and I find that this was all politicized research. And I said, well, we're going to have to publish both sides of the debate. If we're going to have this kind of propaganda on one side, at least we ought to publish papers that are very well written with an opposite point of view, and they will not accept that. So I only served for 3 years. I had to resign because they went against me. They wanted a one-way street, and I refused to go along with that. And it was the medical establishment and the public health establishment. Well, Lord behold, in 2003, I was asked by President Bush to go to the CDC and start overlooking the research there. Oh. And so here I am. I am in the belly of the beast. Yes. And of course, you can just imagine what it was like for me. Mm-hmm. All of the, I was Dr. No. I was looking
Dr.
at
No.
these papers and said, Dr. No, because there is no science here. Show me the sign. Where is the science in this research? Well, it wasn't science. It was social engineering and gun control. Okay. So it was an interesting time that I spent there. But from then on, I decided I'm really going to research this topic in all of this comprehensively. And that resulted in my book, America, Guns and Freedom. And part of the book deals with this problem with public health and the medical establishment. But I also go into what other countries supposedly have that we don't have, the social democracy of Europe. And mass shootings, I researched many areas. In fact, I think all facets of the gun rights and public health and gun control, and the result is this book, which I'm very proud of. But it's more than just public health and the medical establishment. That's one part of the book. But
in the back of the book, in the back of the book, it starts to go into some historical pieces about where other countries had dealt with the gun restrictions and how it worked out for them. And it's a very interesting book. It's one of those when you get started, it kind of you know that the CDC and the AMA are working against you, and this just confirms it all.
And so it was really funny because Rob started reading the book, and he was like, every time I open this book, it just keeps making me madder and madder and madder, because it's like, this is confirming things that I know, and yet I had no proof of.
Right, I got no proof of, but I know it's happening. And they've actually taken the funding from the CDC to keep them from being able to do some of this, but they keep trying to reinstate that funding.
So were you tied to the fact that they were successful in defunding the CDC, making guns a mental health issue?
Well, in fact, I was one of the 4 people who testified to the Congressional Committee in 1996, in the spring of 1996, and as a result of this testimony, it was that Congress passed the Dickey Amendment, restricting the type of research that ended with gun propaganda, really, that wasn't scientific. And to this day, that is what we're fighting, because the Democrats in the House, they already started a campaign to resume full funding for this gun and violence research, which is really not research at all. It's junk science, pseudoscience, politicized, and shouldn't have any place in any kind of medical journalism or medical research. But it was as a result of our testimony, and I'm very proud of that, as you can imagine. The other doctors were Dr. Will Waters, Dr. Timothy Wheeler, who is the founder of Doctor for Responsible Gun Ownership, and Don B. Cates. And it was the 4 of us. And we're very proud that because of that testimony, that's one of the greatest victories that we have had in the guns rights movement, because they are trying to use public health as a way to circumvent the Second Amendment. They are saying guns are an epidemic. Excuse me?
Your testimony was in 1990, what did you say, 1998?
1996.
1996.
1996. And that summer, Congress passed the Dickey Amendment that restricted pseudo research.
So let me make a point. Let me make a point to all of our listeners, because we've been having a conversation. I don't know that you caught the first part of our show, but I had just come from Washington, D.C., where a friend of mine testified in front of the House Judiciary Committee about assault weapons, and how the flip has happened from where they had been anti-gun against pistols until Heller and Otis McDonald in those court cases, and now they flipped to rifles. But so it's just really interesting to see that you, 23 years ago, were having this conversation saying that you guys are anti-gun and there's no science tied to it. That's the point I wanted to make. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly correct. And we cited example after example of pseudo research, and again, I have several chapters in the book describing examples of this in various articles. As a result of our testimony, by the way, not only the gun violence pseudo research was banned, but also the number one investigator for the CDC, Arthur Kellerman, was defunded.
Yay.
And that's right. He was defunded because he will not give his data. Here he is writing these articles. We can go into it because this is important. But
okay, so here's the deal. Hold on a second. We're going to come right up. We're going to come up to a hard stop commercial break, but will you stay over the commercial break and come back and do another segment with us?
Okay.
Okay, so folks, I want you to know that we'll be right back with Dr. Miguel Faria from America, Guns, and Freedom. And man, this is a book that you want to look at. This is a book you want to read. It's going to confirm a lot of the things that you've already known, and he's going to give you the facts and the data and the information to support that. We'll be right back after these messages. Okay, folks, we are back with book author Dr. Miguel Faria. And let me tell you, this is the book that you want in your hands. You want to start reading. America, Guns, and Freedom, A Journey into Politics and the Public Health and Gun Control Movement. The public health and gun control movement. Think about this. This is the CDC trying to say that guns are a mental health crisis, that guns are an overall health crisis. So what, Dr. Faria, tell me, what actually motivated you to sit down and write these 450 pages of facts and information and things that just make you go, ugh?
Well, because with my knowledge of history, I know that when science becomes subverted by the state, when the state begins to dictate science, it's a danger for the people, it's a danger for humanity. In the last century, 100 million people were killed by their own governments because science was subjugated by the state. It's one of the main reasons. So it really affected me. Here I am, an editor of a major medical journal, and I find that I'm having or given no choice but to consider only one side of the gun debate, and that all for articles to be published, they have to end up with the same conclusion that guns are a menace, that they are like viruses, they need to be eradicated from the population, and there was no discussion about the beneficial aspects of gun ownership. There was no discussion about constitutional issues. Oh no, that was supposed to be sidestepped, and I refused to go along with that. It really shocked me because I'm also a medical historian. I've written about medical history, and here I am seeing. And not only that, but I am originally from Cuba. So that here is a country that revolution ended in dictatorship, and in which science became completely taken over by the state. There was no private education. Healthcare was run by the state. And Cuba remains a communist country to this day. And now I'm seeing that some of the same things are happening here, not by revolution, but by evolution. It's slowly taking place. So I had to step up in front of the train, basically, and say, no, this cannot go on. So I was shocked, and I decided that I would do something about it. And as I discussed, I ended up testifying in Congress, and then I supervised the CDC for a while. And then after that, I said, I do have to write this book.
So has you writing this book, has that affected your medical career and your growth in the industry? I mean, you looked like you were turning into a absolute medical rock star in being in charge of this and working with that. I mean, these are things in your career that people only dream about. So when you took a stand, did that affect you and affect your career?
Oh, it sure did. It sure did. I had to resign from the Medical Association of Georgia. Fortunately, I had already, I decided that this was so important that eventually I retired. But I was a very successful neurosurgeon and a very, very prosperous career. And I decided that, I needed to pay back. This country received me with open arms, and that I will dedicate myself to try to preserve freedom in this country. And one of the biggest issues to me was the gun ownership. I believe that law-abiding citizens ought to be able to have guns. And I have looked at the data, and it convinced me. In fact, I started, with the idea that we ought to have a debate on this. If we're going to have it, both sides of the debate should be promulgated. But no, the AMA insisted that we will have a public relation campaign for gun control, and I did not go along. So yes, it affected my life, it affected my career, but I am very happy in what I'm doing, and I will do what I can to prevent our country to go the way of Cuba, and this is one way of doing so.
So where can people find your book?
The best place is in Amazon.
Okay.
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com, and it's called America, Guns, and Freedom. Dr. Miguel, is it Miguel?
Yes.
Faria.
Faria. Yeah, you said it very well, yes.
Okay, yeah, for an Ohio-based girl. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure I'm going to do this well. So here's an interesting statement in the flyleaf that I read that I was like, this kind of stopped me right there. That he argues that gun violence is not merely a consequence of easy gun availability, but instead due to the cycle of government dependency, broken families, failure of public education, and the cultural disintegration that has been taking place for decades, particularly in the poorer southern states, and for which the federal government welfare policies have been largely responsible. I can't imagine that was a popular statement being made at all.
Well, it's the truth. It is the truth. And, we have a lot of violence. We have a lot of crime. And I think that the best way to stabilize our situation today is to allow more law-abiding citizens to carry firearms for self-protection. And instead of demonizing firearms, instead of doing that, we should be having more training at the police. And by the way, I did this in Macon here where I live. The police department did have a gun training and safety course. And I think that needs to be developed in many other areas. And instead of demonizing guns, we ought to be encouraging law-abiding citizens to carry firearms. Because, the citizen is the witness. He's right there when a crime occurs. And he's able sometimes to stop, for example, mass shooters. And who are these mass shooters? They are criminally deranged individuals that have been created in our society because they have been told as children that they will succeed, they don't have to compete anymore, they don't have to work hard anymore, that just everything will fall in their laps. They grow up, and this does not happen. And
reality happens.
Their own personal failure, that's exactly, reality hits them, and their own personal failure is turned around, and society is blamed for their own failure. But in a way, this public school system has encouraged this. And I think that's what the problem has been and continue to be. I call it the mass shooting derangement syndrome. And the best way to stop this is with law-abiding citizens being around and stopping some of the shooters. Otherwise, the law-abiding citizens, the people become sitting ducks in a gallery,
right,
and unable to defend themselves. And it's a shame. We mention other countries, and here we are. Let's mention Great Britain, for example. This is a nation that gave us Edward Koch and Sir William Blackstone, who developed the theory of self-defense and that a man's home is his castle. Well, in England today, the woman cannot even brandish a knife to scare off an assailant, much less a firearm. They have a rape alarm, and they're supposed to run, scream, and with no dignity whatsoever. It is a ridiculous and a very dangerous situation. And this is what's happening in many of these other countries in Europe.
Wow, this is amazing. Hey, we're coming right up to the top, and I want to give you another plug. So folks, I want you to go look for his book on Amazon, America, Guns and Freedom, The Journey into Politics and Public Health and Gun Control Movement by Dr. Miguel Faria. So folks, you really do want to. It's 450 pages of information, facts, and things that go bump in the night and may anger you, but it's stuff you want to know. Dr. Faria, thank you very much for joining us on Eye on the Target Radio.